Division Cyanophyta, commonly known as blue-green algae, consists of 150 genera and about 2,500 species. Phylum of bacteria that gets energy through photosynthesis. One of the largest and most important group of bacteria on Earth. Are found in almost all habitats of ocean to freshwater. They can be single-celled or colonies. Colonies may form filaments, sheets, or even hollow balls. Cytology. Individual cells are prokaryotic in nature. Vegetative and reproductive cells are non-flagellate. The body structure is simple. The cell walls contain pectin, hemicellulose, and cellulose are sometimes in the form of mucus. Principal pigments are chlorophylls A, C, phycocyanin, and phycoerythrin. Other pigments like B-carotene and different xanthophylls like mixoxanthin and mixoxanthophylls are also present. Membrane-bound chromatophore are absent. Pigments are found embedded in thylakoids. Chlorophyll is not contained within the chloroplast but scattered throughout the protoplasm. The reserve foods of Cyanophyta are starch and granules. The cell wall contains a thin peptidoglycan layer and serves to provide a fixed form in algae and protects the cell contents. A layer of mucus are present which blankets the cell wall. Mucus helps the movement of the slide, or also known as locomotion, in unicellular cyanobacteria, as well as vibrate or back and forth motion, or also known as oscillation, in the cyanobacteria that shape threads or filaments. The cell wall is present in between mucilaginous sheath and plasma lemma. It is rigid and usually made up of four layers. Individual cells of a cyanobacterium typically have a thick, gelatinous cell wall. Motility of Cyanophyta. Cyanophyta lacks flagella, but some species may move about by gliding along surfaces. Multicellular filamentous forms of oscillatoria are capable of waving motion. In water columns, some cyanobacteria float by forming gas vesicles. Reproduction of Cyanophyta. Reproduction takes place by vegetative and asexual methods. Vegetative reproduction takes place by cell division and fragmentation. Asexual reproduction takes place by endospores, exospores, akinets, and nanospheres. Sexual reproduction is completely absent in division Cyanophyta. Fragmentation is the termination of some members of the body to form a new individual. Occurs in the form of algae filaments, or also known as yarn. One example is Oscillatora. Asexual spores are referred as heterocysts, and in unfavorable circumstances, heterocysts still able to survive because of the thick cell wall. After returning, heterocysts can form new filaments. So, the two pictures are example. The top picture is an example of fragmentation, and the bottom picture is an example of asexual reproduction. Order Crococales. Members of this group are greenish-blue in color. Generally, these algae form the mucous membranes of the rock of the wet walls. After the division of the cells remain coupled, mucus form groups or colonies. Examples of the order Crococales are Crocus, and Glycopsa. Crocus are unicellular organisms or groups in the form of an aggregate of two or more cells. The results of cell division of crocus are hemispherical in shape. Glycopsa are elongated round shape and is surrounded by membrane with several generations of cells contained therein. Membranes sometimes there are pigmented. Leucopsa are found on damp rocks in the water. Order Chamaecyphinales. Single-celled algae or colonies that have thread-shaped spores. The threads can be disjointed, which is called homogeneum, and to creep in a new colony's process is called fragmentation. An example is Chamaecyphon. Order Hormogenesis. The cells are bean-shaped colonies. They rarely have a true branching and more often have false branching. The threads can always be formed as homogeneum. Examples are Oscillatoria, Nostoc commune, Anabaena, Spirulina, and Rebulia. Prochlorophyta. These are photosynthetic prokaryote member of the phytoplankton group, Phycoplankton. Discovered in 1975 near the Great Barrier Reef and off the coast of Mexico. They are abundant in nutrient-poor tropical waters and use a unique photosynthetic pigment, divinyl chlorophyll, to absorb light and acquire energy. They are oxygenic prokaryotes differing from other cyanobacteria by the presence of a light harvesting system containing both chlorophylls, which are chlorophyll A and B. They are mainly limited to living in tropical and subtropical marine environments with an optimal growth temperature at about 24 degrees Celsius. They exist as free-living components of pelagic nanoplankton and obligate symbionts within marine didnid ascidians and holoturians. Prochlorophyta can be unicellular or filamentous, and depending on the filamentous species, they can either be branched or unbranched. The only group of photosynthetic bacteria to have both chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. Some members of Prochlorophyta can be found as symbionts in the tissue of marine vertebrates. Prochlorococcus is the most abundant genus of photosynthetic organisms. They are responsible for the majority of the primary productivity in oligotrophic gyres and are different from nanoplankton and microplankton. They have a greater surface to volume ratio, which enables them to obtain the scarce nutrients in these ecosystems. They compose of cells between zero point 0.2 and 2 micrometers that are either photosynthetic or heterotrophic. Cell wall and reserve food. Prochlorophytes have a starch-like reserve polysaccharide. The reserve polysaccharide is cyanophycean starch stored in tiny granules lying between the thylakoids. They have multi-layered cell wall. Motility and reproduction. Reproduction is strictly asexual by simple cell division or fragmentation of the colony or filaments. Prochlorophytes are non-motile, gram-negative eubacteria. Taxonomy of Prochlorophyta. Since their possible phylogenetic relationships to ancestral green plant chloroplasts have not received support from molecular biology, it now seems expedient to consider them as aberrant cyanophytes. They are currently recognized as a distinct genus. An example of Pleurophyta is Prochlorococcus. This contributes significantly to phytoplankton biomass and primarily production in the sea. It is often numerically dominant in the euphotic zone of the tropical and subtropical ocean. However, its contribution to phytoplankton biomass and primary production is largely unknown.